friends, and welcome to the CUInsight Network. My name is Robbie Young. I am the Vice President of Strategic Growth here at CUInsight, and it's my job on this show to have conversations with thought leaders who support the credit union community. We'll identify issues affecting credit unions, and we'll discuss best practices that help us learn from one another and strengthen our credit unions. My guest on today's show is Steve Torino, Chief Information Security Officer at Synergent. Steve, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Robbie. I'm excited to be here.
I will say I'm very much looking forward to this because if there was another job in my life that I would like to do, it's Chief Information Security Officer. I know it sounds crazy, but that's right. That's true. I've even looked it up, what it takes to be one. So most of us didn't grow up thinking that we'd get to work with credit unions. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I did not necessarily think that I'd want to work with credit unions, although as I started out my career journey, I did begin not in a credit union, but in a small community mutual savings bank. We kind of got into the local community banking and local credit investment decisions, and it's always kind of been an interest of mine. I'm also a member of several credit unions and have been for many years. But no, it wasn't what I thought I would do. I guess probably my earliest years, I would have thought I would do something in medicine or health, like a doctor or something like that. As I got older, I developed a lot of other interests that could have taken me in different directions. Linguistics was one of them, history was another. But technology was always something I was really passionate about and kind of worked out well for me.
I like that. And I especially appreciate that you're what you wanted to be when you grew up, because I wanted to be a surgeon.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yes.
Yep.
The TV show ER was something we were always allowed to watch when we were kids. And I was just like, yes, that's going to be me.
Yeah. Then you figure out what it takes to actually become that. And it's a very, very long process and quite.
Yes. So what was the journey like to your current role as Chief Information Security Officer at Synergent?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of glaze through the earlier years and focus more on how I got to Synergent, because it's actually kind of an interesting story. So as I mentioned, I started out small community bank, moved on to a larger regional bank, and then eventually a nationwide payment processing company. At that point, I pivoted and began working for a series of cybersecurity vendors, so vendors in the space in general, and ended up at a company that did governance, risk, and compliance software, which was kind of the culmination of a lot of the experience that I had had in the past. I couldn't have probably designed this company or this position for myself as well as it actually fit. And so that was a great experience. And then when I was ready to move on from that, I actually called, the first call I made was to the CPA firm that did our SOC exams. And I spoke to the founder of that firm and I just said, hey, I'm thinking about moving on, and here's kind of what I'm thinking of doing. And, I want to do more like fractional or VC kind of services. And he was like, hey, come here and do it. So I went over there, and Synergent was one of our customers, actually. And after probably about 9 months or so of working as a contractor, we just kind of realized that with the scale and the size and everything and complexity of Synergent, that it made more sense to have somebody full-time. And since I was already about 9 months into the job and kind of knew the people, they knew what they were getting with me, we just decided it would be a great match to do that. So I joined Synergent full-time officially in April of this year. So it's been going on about 8 months or so, and it's going great so far.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about Synergent and where and how they add value to the credit union space?
Yes, absolutely. So Synergent is a CUSO. We're owned primarily by the main credit union league. And we've been around since the 1970s, provide a number of different services and solutions to the credit union system. The core is kind of technology, where we provide core processing as well as consulting around core, digital banking, payments. We also have a marketing solutions group that works with credit unions to come up with campaigns, email marketing. We do statements, just a whole bunch of things. In addition to the core consulting, we also do some business continuity planning consulting for credit unions as well. So we kind of run the gamut from technology, payments, marketing, and some ancillary solutions.
Awesome. So credit unions are navigating an increasingly complex cyber threat landscape. From your perspective, what does strong cybersecurity governance look like? And how can credit unions build a culture that supports it at every level of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, governance really is kind of foundational to doing information security the right way. And in fact, I think that's been the broad general consensus within the industry. In fact, I know we're going to talk about frameworks a little later, but there's a very common framework called the NIST Cybersecurity framework that got a revamp probably about two or 3 years ago for version 2.0. And one of the main changes they made there was in the domains, which were previously 5 domains, they increased it to 6 and made the 6th one governance and had that be kind of at the center of all the other domains around it. So it really is important to get governance right. And I think it kind of starts really like a lot of things do at the top. So board representation, for example. I know this can be a challenge for credit unions. Many times the board is comprised of the membership, right? And particularly in situations when the field of membership might be limited to things like an employer group or something like that, it could be hard to find board members with cybersecurity, basically understanding and skill set. But it's key to have that because in order to set the expectations for management, who will then set the tone for the rest of the organization, we really want to make sure that it's getting the attention that it deserves at the highest levels. Then I think as you start implementing it throughout the credit union, you want to have the right structures in place. So we'll talk about things like having a cybersecurity or information security steering committee, right? That's probably going to be made up of management and maybe some technical folks that meet on a periodic basis, monthly, quarterly, whatever the case may be. And then you're probably going to want to also have some type of a like risk audit committee at the board level as well, which might be comprised of senior management as well as one or more members of the board. So you're getting this kind of constant feedback loop around these topics and information is being shared. Folks understand what's kind of expected of them. Really, at the end of the day, this is all about risk. And credit unions are really good at managing risk. They do it for credit risk and interest rate risk and all kinds of other risks. And cybersecurity really is just another risk. I think where we complicate it sometimes is in the language we use to talk about it. So I often encourage people to use the terminology and the language that we use to describe other risks, right, that boards and leadership are comfortable hearing about. We don't want to go talking about SQL injection and buffer overflow. We want to talk about the likelihood and the impact of a risk, for example, and what that could mean in monetary terms. So governance overall, super important to getting a cybersecurity program done the right way. I think it starts from the top down. It needs to hopefully impact the culture such that operational folks and everyone is conscious and aware of these topics. That's why things like security awareness training is important, but just kind of having it be front and center for management so that it's brought up in different meetings. It's considered when we kick projects off, that it's not an afterthought. Those are all signs of a program where governance is working effectively and cybersecurity is being integrated into the business.
So true. So collaboration is often cited as one of the industry's greatest strengths. How can credit unions better leverage information sharing with both the peers and their industry partners to improve overall security posture without really complicating operations?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways of doing this. One thing that credit unions have going for them that other organizations don't necessarily is the concept of credit union leagues, right? And I think that's one area where if your leagues can provide opportunities to do that. I know in Maine, we do quite a bit of information sharing around things like fraud and things like that so that other credit unions are aware of what one has experienced. So I think looking at leagues could be one area for that. There's also an organization that exists called the National Credit Union Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. So if you look to the critical infrastructure sectors, which are kind of defined by the federal government, for each of the sectors, they've created something called an ISAC or Information Sharing and Analysis Center. There is one for financial services, but as you can imagine, its membership is largely banks. So the NCU Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, that's specifically for credit unions and CUSOs. That's a great resource for information sharing industry-wide. And then I think some of the other ones, and this might be more for any of the listeners who may be in IT or information security themselves, is the other information sharing groups that we have available within the profession. So you could look to like FBI InfraGard would be a great example. There's usually a chapter, and I think every state has one, as well as some of our industry groups like ISACA is one that I'm pretty involved in. It may not be information sharing at a granular level, but it is definitely information sharing about sort of trends just in the industry in general. Certainly some things are going to be really specific to credit unions, but a lot of the information security threats that we see out there, they're pretty broad in terms of the industries that they're going after and the tactics, techniques, and procedures that they're using to get in. So I wouldn't want to make it sound like the only place you want to get information is from other credit unions. But if you're looking for that, I would definitely check out the NCU ISA.
Yeah, those are certainly some great resources. building on that, how can a well-designed security framework actually enable innovation and strengthen member trust rather than slow it down?
Yeah, what's interesting, I think there's been a shift probably over the last 10 or 15 years or so in the space of looking at information security as going from a kind of like a policing or like a watchdog type of function to nowadays in a more modern age being more of a business enabler. And I think frameworks can really help with that. So typically the selection of a framework would be for one of a couple reasons. Either in the like a credit union example, you're regulated, right? And your regulators either tell you by statute what framework you need to follow, or they strongly suggest that you follow one or another. In other industries, it might be a little bit different. A lot of times people are looking for attestations like a SOC 2 or ISO 27001. That's mainly so they can sell into whatever verticals or whatever they want to sell into. If you're healthcare, you do HIPAA. If you're defense, you do CMMC and DFARS. But I think for credit union audiences, if you look at something like the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I mentioned earlier, so this framework is actually, I really like this framework. It's very flexible. It's not super prescriptive. It's easy to comprehend, and it makes it easy to report on. So the way that it's structured is they have 6 domains. So govern, as I already mentioned, and then there's identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So all those 5 with governance in the center. And each domain is broken down into categories. And then each category is broken down into subcategories. And so what you're left with is about 110 or so subcategories, which are really outcome-oriented statements that don't tell you exactly what you have to do to get there, but they tell you the target state that you're looking for. And there's a kind of a maturity model built into it as well. But those subcategories aren't controls themselves. And so the NIST CSF gives you the flexibility to use whatever control set you want. They give you out of the box what they call informative references, which are linkages basically to controls from well-known cybersecurity frameworks like NIST 853 or the Center for Internet Security controls. But you can pick and choose. You could mix and match from different frameworks. You could write your own control statements. You could pull in language like from the ASET tool, for example, that could map in very nicely to it there as well. And I think once you have a framework selected, you understand where your maturity is kind of at a subcategory level, that's when you can really start benefiting from this structure, because for each subcategory, you're going to assess your maturity on it, and you can kind of develop a roadmap from there. I think it's also really defensible when you're talking to regulators. This is a super well-known framework that a lot of industries have standardized on, and it's just an overall great framework. So I think putting something like that into place, it gives you a lot of structure for the organization. It's very defensible. And it's also helpful for in terms of like reporting and metrics, because again, it uses that simple language that I think most leaders are going to understand: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern.
And we certainly love those data-driven decisions.
We do.
So as we look to the future, what's Synergent's focus on the road ahead?
Yeah, so Synergent's been around since the 70s, and we have a pretty high concentration of credit unions in the New England area, although we do have credit unions throughout the country. So I think we'll continue to expand our relationships with credit unions. We're always looking to be seen as a partner of choice within the credit union industry. We'll analyze different additional solutions that we can bring in. That's another value that we provide. It's relationships with fintechs and other companies that can connect into core and offer credit unions innovative solutions so that they can compete.
So not busy at all. Just a few things. But to wrap up the show, I'd like to have some fun with some rapid fire questions to let our listeners get to know you a little bit better. The questions are rapid, but your answers certainly don't have to be. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
This is when we layer in the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire music when the lights dim down. At least in my head. So who is someone in your life that was a great leader, and what makes them great?
Yeah, I had a mentor, a guy named Mike Stankiewicz, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he was very, very influential on me. He was a really, really brilliant guy and challenged me a lot to certainly go to him when I needed answers or when I needed to understand something better, but not to take away from myself the opportunity to read and to learn and to discover things on my own. So he would always be quick to say to me, hey, I could give you this answer, but well, how about I tell you where to go look for it? And then you can come back to me with informed questions and we can have a conversation about it. That's really informed a lot of how I tend to approach things. Like I'm very focused on making sure that I read everything and gather my thoughts and opinions on topics and stuff like that. And I try to encourage my team to do that as well. Sometimes it can be really easy to just reach out to someone who you know has the answer, but I don't know that that's always serving yourself in the best way.
So if you're going to splurge on something and you want to treat yourself, what's one thing that you might invest in a bit?
Probably the biggest area where I splurge is on travel. I travel quite a bit, really enjoy traveling. And at the end of the year, like this time of year, when you start seeing the statements come out with what your annual spending was, I'll look at it and I'll try to think, okay, where are some areas where I can cut back and where are some areas where I don't feel like I need to cut back at all and I want to treat myself. And I would say travel is probably the main one.
I like it. And to pull on that thread a little bit more, if you're traveling, what city are you most excited to visit?
I think the city that I'm most excited to visit is probably Dallas, and I do get down there a few times a year for work reasons. The reason why it's my favorite is because I have some close friends that are there, and it's really nice to be able to combine a work trip with like a dinner with friends that you haven't seen in a while. So I'm going to pick Dallas for this one.
I like it. And I have actually hadn't been there at all before. And then this year I was there twice.
Oh, nice. How'd you like it?
Oh, I liked it. I was in the Fort Worth area once, and then we went to Venture Tech, which was right outside of the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. So that was cool.
Cool.
So what is one book that you think everyone should read?
Yeah, so I'm going to recommend a book called Cybersecurity for Everybody. It's written by a woman named Kathy Oleslager, who I have worked with previously. She has a real passion for humanizing cybersecurity. So whereas a lot of books that you'll read on the subject are pretty technical in nature, this one's super accessible for non-technical people. And it goes into kind of the positive or beneficial cyber hygiene things we all can be doing in our day-to-day lives that'll make us safer and hopefully less likely to experience any sort of cybersecurity related threats in our day-to-day.
I like that. Could be a solid stocking stuffer for some.
Absolutely.
I guess this might come out a little after Christmas, so there's always next year. So what is your best hack for creating balance and integration between your work life and your life?
Yeah, so this is something I think for everybody, but maybe especially in leadership, that's really, really important. It can be so easy to just get pulled into so many different things, and it can result in losing some balance in your life. But I think we're all ultimately responsible for maintaining our own balance. And we can do that sort of guided by what our core kind of values are. One for me that's been really important and helps me perform at my highest levels is making sure that I exercise every day. So I typically do a workout before I start my workday, and I'm pretty regimented about doing it. And I've learned over the years that when I don't do it and, I let all the other excuses come in or just try to give myself a break because I'm too busy, it doesn't take too long for me to realize I really need that in my life. So that's something I've prioritized and that I'm pretty passionate about.
I like it. What kind of workouts are we doing? Are we doing some runs, lifting weights, or just all of it?
Combination of all of it. Yeah, I have a membership to Orange Theory, which kind of combines running with rowing and weightlifting. So a little bit of everything.
Oh, I like it. And then you can do that when you travel.
Yeah, which has been great, actually, because there's studios all over the country.
That's awesome. So we'll be sure to link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. My last question for you would be, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share or ask of our listeners?
Yeah, I think for a final thought, I just spoke on a panel last week in Maine about AI and its implications on cybersecurity. So I think this is one of those situations where technology is evolving a lot faster than laws do. But there are some really good resources out there for cybersecurity AI. One of them is also from NIST. It's the NIST Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework, or RMF. That's a great one to start looking at if you haven't already. And just wanted to mention that to raise general awareness.
Awesome. Thank you again, Steve, for being on the show. Stay well, and thanks to all of our listeners today for tuning in to the CUInsight Network. We'll be back again next time.